The defending national champions. How's that sound, Savannah?
Sounds really good.
Good? Yeah. Defending national champions about to hit the practice field to prepare for 2022 here in the spring. We got Savannah Lee Richardson on the line from Dawn of the Dog to take a look at the offense. Hey, Savannah.
How's it going, Mark? And I love saying that, especially on March 10th, because, 3rd and 10 was the big play that Keely Ringo caught that big interception and ran it all the way back. So,
oh, wow.
Another day to celebrate.
When you're connecting 3rd and 10s with March 10th, man, that's hardcore.
Well, Alabama fans did it in the 2018 national championship with 2nd and 26 or
26.
SEC, whichever one it was. So Georgia fans did February 18th for 2nd and 18, and then today for 3rd and 10. So
I get it. Whatever you can latch on to take a dig at Bama makes total sense. All right, this quarterback situation. Any national championship quarterback is going to come back and he's got the job and he's good to go. Now, I don't know if that's the way it's going to be at Georgia. I don't know what Kirby Smart has had to say, but obviously he's got a line of 4 and 5 stars behind him. How do you think this is going to play out or should play out?
Well, I mean, anybody in their right mind would probably go with Stetson because he won the national championship last year. But there is still, a small percentage of people that want to see Brock Vandagriff, Gunnar Stockton, and even I'm blanking. Why am I blanking?
Carson Beck.
Carson Beck, thank you. Who I'm still kind of surprised is still in Athens. I expected him to kind of transfer out, but there is still people who I think would transfer by the end of spring. So he could be somebody like that could. Worst case scenario, if Stetson gets hurt or something, then we could probably see Brock or one of them kind of come in. But to flat out say that one of them could beat Stetson right now, I think is a hard to sell because Stetson has won the offense over. These wide receivers that are coming back all know and trust Stetson, and Stetson trusts them to catch the ball and everything. And so I think Stetson is your guy right now. And until he proves otherwise, I don't think Kirby Smart should change that situation at all. Stetson is a starting quarterback. Stetson has the leadership skills and the tenacity and the grit that you want out of somebody. Just because he isn't 6'4" and have a bomb of an arm, it doesn't matter. That kid's running the offense like he should.
So, Savannah, when you look at the other guys, it's impossible to tell at this point. Carson Beck's been out there 23 attempts last year, but besides that, garbage time. And with Brock and with Gunnar, nothing to go on. Obviously, they've got a ton of talent. Do you have a preference, based on what you've seen, based on what you heard? Does the fan base have a preference in regards to, we think this guy is the next guy?
A lot of people are leaning heavily on Brock right now because he is the one that Coach Donnan, who formerly coached at Georgia, but he also goes on the UGA Sports podcast and does a lot of stuff. He loves talking about him in practice and how good he's doing. And he's another quarterback that's really high IQ, really knows the game, coach's son. And so he's somebody that I think is going to be the next in line. He's got the speed with his legs. He's a, kind of a dual threat, but he's got a stronger arm than Stetson, in my opinion. And he's bigger. He's 6'2", 6'3", or something like that. And even though he played at a 1A private school, I think he's going to be somebody that's the next guy. And the best thing about him and Gunnar, if we're talking about both of them, is that neither one of them are really prima donnas. They don't really care. Not that they don't care. I know they want to play and stuff, but they're more about being a part of a team and learning and growing. And when their time comes, then take advantage of it. Because we've seen it only takes 1 or 2 seasons to impress NFL scouts enough to draft somebody. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. Brock was really somebody on the scout team last year that came up and, impressed a lot. I don't think Carson's got a lot of work to do. When he threw that interception in one of the games last year and didn't try to run down the guy to tackle him was a big sign of where he was in terms of the lineup. And I think they didn't really give Brock a chance then because he was still so young. But this spring is going to be huge for that backup position because I think you're going to see Carson and Brock kind of battling it out for the backup spot. And if Carson isn't careful, Gunnar could really come in and do so because that kid just rewrote the Georgia record books in terms of running and even throwing. So I'm excited about Gunnar. Haven't really got to see too much on him since he's got to campus, but they are all good things so far as coming out of Athens.
We're talking up the Georgia Bulldogs. They are just a couple days away from spring practice. We got Savannah Lee Richardson on the line. We're breaking them down position by position, starting with the offense. The running back room's always loaded, but no James Cook, Zamir White gone off to the NFL draft. We saw them at the combine last week. So we've seen Kendall Milton. We've seen Kenny McIntosh not getting the type workload as the first two that I just mentioned. But does that seem to be pretty cut and dry that those two guys are the guys?
Yeah, right now, for sure. I think Kendall Milton is probably going to be the starter. It's going to be more kind of what we saw early, like later on in Todd Gurley, early on in Nick Chubb's career, where one of them's getting a little bit more of the carries, but that second guy can come in if he needs to with Kenny Mack, because Kenny Mack's really good with his hands too and can catch out of the backfield and take off. But then again, you could use them equally like they have been with Zamir and James. It's kind of depending on how well they practice and how well that they continue to develop. I really want to see Kendall Milton just kind of take it away from people. He came into Georgia so hyped up, really talented, 5-star, got hurt. And then he got hurt again last year. And so I really want him to use that adversity that he's kind of had to overcome and just really hit the ground running this season. I have really big expectations for him. And I think you're going to see a kind of a one-back system with Georgia that you haven't since Todd Gurley, in my opinion, with him. But then you also have Branson Robinson, who's coming in as a true freshman, and Andrew Paul, who could both kind of earn some kind of cleanup time if they need to. And I'm excited about both of those kids too. I know we talked about them before, but Kenny could surprise some people, I think, too, because he wants it so bad. He's worked hard. He chose to come back this coming up year. And so I think he wants to kind of leave his own mark and not be considered the third stringer his entire career.
Breaking down the dogs, we got Savannah Lee Richardson on the line from Dawn of the Dog, and we're looking at the wide receivers at Georgia. George Pickens, of course, didn't get to play much last year, but he's off to the NFL and should be a pretty premier selection there. And take us through the wide receiver group.
So I'm going to come out and make a pretty bold prediction here, but I think this year's wide receivers group is going to be better than last year. Georgia did lose Jermaine Burton to Alabama, but so be it. That's where he wants to go, and he feels like that is the best spot for him. Kudos to that kid, and then hope he does well because kid's talented. But with A.D. Mitchell, Keirs Jackson, Lab McConkey, Brock Bowers all coming back, it's loaded. Brock Bowers is going to have a monstrous season, and we still don't even know how good he is because he's a freshman. I think he can get even better. A.D. Mitchell is someone who kind of had an up and down year with catching at the beginning, and then he really started to hit his stride in the playoffs and stuff. And so I think he's going to carry that confidence into this upcoming season and really just be that deep threat that Georgia needed. And we're not even considering Marcus Rosemary-Jack-Saint, Arian Smith, even Arik Gilbert, who is now practicing with the team again. And so those are three more guys that haven't gotten to prove themselves because of injuries or other circumstances. And so Georgia has a loaded down wide receivers room that Stetson can pick and choose who he wants to throw to. I'm not even considering Dominic Blaylock, who was also hurt most of the year last year and just really didn't do much of anything outside of special teams. And it's exciting. That's what probably the room I'm most excited about. I'm usually tight ends and other things, but I know I'm including the tight ends this year with them. But that group has so much talent and potential. It's going to be fun because we all love when Georgia runs the ball, but it was so exciting to see those 60-yard passing touchdowns to Brock Bowers and then the big one to A.D. Mitchell in the national championship game. So I'm really, really stoked about that group.
So you're taking on the wide receivers. You threw in Brock Bowers. Of course, he's a guy that a lot of people kind of passed on. They didn't necessarily figure that he was going to do much, even though he was a high 4-star, if not a 5-star out of California, third-rated tight end in the nation. And then boom, the rest is history. He's the best tight end in college football. I don't think it's really an argument at this point. Go ahead, Savannah.
I didn't even mention Darnell Washington.
That's where I was headed.
And then it's crazy that there's been more than one kind of expert or analyst come out and say that Oscar Delp, who is a incoming true freshman, could be another Brock Bowers. He has the same size and speed. He could be his little brother. And so those are two more names to kind of just be like, yep, that's two other weapons Georgia has. I know Georgia lost a lot on defense last year, but there were some guys like Pickens that they lost. And then nobody will ever realize how big James Cook was and how big that loss is, because there's this much depth kind of behind him that they're going to be able to just kind of plug in people and see who works where. And even, people who were worried about Jermaine Burton leaving, second, number 2 wide receiver on the list after the year, but A.D. Mitchell was right there with him. And so I wouldn't be worried at all about Georgia's wide receivers heading into the spring.
All right. We got Savannah Lee Richardson on the line breaking down the Dogs. They are just about to hit the practice field for spring practice to gear up for 2022. Jeremy Sawyer, one of the best offensive linemen in the country. He moves on in the NFL draft. I got a list on this banner coming up of returnees. So the offensive line seems to be in really good shape.
Yeah, we got a good many coming back, and then even Tate Ratledge coming back from a season-ending ankle injury last year. That's what I'm excited for interior wise, because that's where Georgia's losing Justin Schaefer, and that's where kind of Jamari Sawyer moved to towards the end of the year, kind of letting Broderick Jones kind of take over that left tackle position. And so the interior is going to be the biggest question. With Stacey Searles coming in from North Carolina, I think that's going to be where his bread and butter is. That's what we saw with him, with Clint Bowling and Ben Jones when he was at Georgia before. And so taking Tate and kind of putting him in that leadership role of being that left guard that he earned the starting spot last year. So be kind of safe to assume that he'll be there this year as well. And then you have Warren Erickson, who's probably going to be the right guard, but Xavier Truss could be somebody that beats him out for it, because Warren just did not impress me that much last year. He had his great moments and stuff, but a lot of times he got beat. And Georgia really needs to be able to push up front to run the ball earlier on in the game. A lot of the running stuff came, later in the third and fourth quarter when the offensive line finally wore down the defensive line. So those are two things that I'm really looking forward with the guards anyway. I think Stacey's going to kind of move some things around and do some things that people aren't really expecting. Not many people were excited about that hire, but I am, just because I remember Ben Jones and Clinton them coming in, and I'm not even talking about the tackles that he brought in either. Corey Glenn, who didn't have a long NFL career, but somebody that was really exciting too. So, and then I think Broderick Jones is somebody that's going to kind of wrap up that left tackle position. Warren McClendon at right tackle. Those are two people that I expect to keep their jobs, but I'd like to see Amarius Mims kind of come in and earn some more playing time, because he was a 5-star out of high school and we expected a lot out of him. So I'd love to see if he can either play inside or stick to the outside and earn some more playing time, because it's time. Or we could see someone like him leave. There's a couple of offensive linemen that Georgia could probably see leave after spring, just to kind of make room for scholarships. But one of the freshman guys, Ernest Green III, is someone I'm really excited about at the guard position, because he could beat out everybody just because he's kind of naturally gifted like that. And then Cedric Van Pran at center. Absolutely love Cedric. Hardest worker on that entire offensive line. Super smart, super intelligent. And it just kind of reminds me when Georgia was known for having really, really talented centers like Ben Jones. And so that's why I'm excited to see him and Stacey work together too.
Ernest Green, 6'4.5", 330, second-rated offensive lineman in the country, guard center out of California, St. John Bosco. They're a powerhouse out there. And usually, unless you've really got a stud 5-star that is so gifted and has filled out his frame, of course, the offensive line's the one spot in particular, along with quarterback, kind of tough to break in to a program like Georgia and play right away. And it's typically good for those guys to kind of get their reps and fill out and hit the weights for a year before they're ready to really compete. But who knows? He may be that good.
Well, Georgia just has that right guard position, in my opinion, is the weakest area. And so that's kind of why I'm thinking he could push forward to, he may not start right away in game one, but by the end of the season, he could be somebody that really breaks the mold and kind of puts himself into the lineup, because Georgia needs somebody at the right guard to protect and be able to get that push. That was the biggest glaring weakness to me on that front last year, was not being able to run the ball whenever. And I know that that's credit to the defensive lines and stuff too, but Georgia used to be able to get whatever push that they needed, and it didn't come until later on in the games. And that's something that can't happen if you want to be able to continue to kind of run a balanced offense and not just depend on Stetson throwing it 50 times, which we don't need to see that. There's no reason why he needs to do that when you have running backs that are that good and an offensive line that's supposed to be that good. So